turning to an educational perspective, she's the commissioner of the National Center for Special Education Research at the U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Education Sciences. This institute supports rigorous research on children with and at risk for disabilities through advancing the understanding of and practices for teaching, learning, and organizing education systems. They also support research training activities to strengthen the skills of current researchers and to develop the next generation of researchers. Dr. McLaughlin earned her master's and PhD in developmental psychology from Cornell University and has spent her career in the public and private sectors conducting research and evaluations of federal education and early childhood programs for disadvantaged children.
Thank you. And there's only like a little bit more time before you'll get wine and cheese. So that should lift your spirit. I'm going to use my 5 minutes to talk about the investments for what works to improve our communities. And I'll do so, as Denny said, focusing on education. Just by way of background, for those of you who don't know the Institute of Education Sciences, we are the research, evaluation, and statistics arm of the U.S. Department of Education. And by law, we are nonpartisan and we are independent, and we take this role very seriously. So we have to be thoughtful about the work that we do with outside organizations, and it does limit the kind of work that we can do with foundations. But even within this context, the foundation's work in education research has been complementary to what we do at IES. And together, even in this independent role that we play, together I believe we have pushed forward the broader science that's needed for improving education in our communities. And there are 6 specific things that I'd like to highlight today, and many of them you've already heard the seeds of from the previous speakers. The first one is that there is a priority for the use of evidence in decisions about education programs, policies, and practices. Each of the foundations here today and the mission of IES extols the importance of this work, and we've heard from John some of the times when that hasn't been the case. And in education, we actually have support through legislation. The Every Student Succeeds Act that was passed in 2015 requires state and local agencies to use evidence for determining interventions or strategies that they implement. The second thing I'd like to highlight is that we are encouraging replication research. So both foundations and the feds know the importance of building a body of evidence. It's no longer the case that a one-off study cuts it. So there's strength in directly replicating what you've done once again, but there's also strength in varying the context in which you run that intervention and the populations that you use. Thirdly, we're encouraging transparency in research. IES requires its grantees to make their data available for efficacy and effectiveness studies to the public. And they have to develop a plan to do that when they're applying for the grants. And all kinds of research, they are required to have their scientific publication available in our ERIC Clearinghouse system. So the idea is to get that information more available to anyone who wants to use it, especially the data for reuse, reanalysis, that kind of thing. And fourth, as you've heard often today, both foundations and the federal government supports researcher practitioner partnerships. And in particular, what we have focused on at IES is making sure that in these grants that we have that the questions are driven by the state and local education agency. So it's not researcher driven, here's what you want to know, but really coming from the research practitioners, the practitioners themselves. And in the Institute of Education Sciences, we have 3 grant competitions that focus on research practitioner partnerships. Fifth, foundations and IES are attempting to do away with the file drawer problem where studies without positive results go to die. The so-called publication bias makes it hard for studies that don't have positive findings to see the light of day. Registries for efficacy and effectiveness studies can help with this. Researchers are encouraged to pre-register their studies along with their planned analyses. And this will improve accountability. It will ensure that people know about the studies because it's registered, and by registering what analyses they plan, it'll give people a sense of what the results of those analyses were, and not just a fishing expedition for what they could find so that they could get it published. So the foundations have been supportive of this, and actually, as of 2 o'clock, I think one of our main grant competitions has been put up on the website, and so I can talk about it. That is saying that IES will require researchers who do efficacy and effectiveness studies to pre-register their studies. And then, you're the first to hear it. And then the sixth thing is that we're all working on dissemination. And really trying to put the results of research in the hands of those who need it. I think the foundations have done a better job than we have in the federal government, but we're working on it too. At IES, we have the What Works Clearinghouse, which evaluates the results of studies to look at the strength of that evidence. And it also uses evidence to develop practice guides in topic areas such as reading and math that are specifically designed for people who need to use curricula, interventions, that kind of thing, to be able to understand the evidence behind them. We also require dissemination plans in our grants so that all of our grantees have to think not only about where they're going to get their scientific journal published, but how they're going to pass that information on to the people that they work with and to the practitioners who need it at conferences and places where they may pick it up more easily. Our new director, as of about a month ago, Mark Schneider, is committed to improving the What Works Clearinghouse, or continuing to improve the What Works Clearinghouse and make it a more user-friendly place for our stakeholders, and we're committed to shorter, more useful products, and so stay tuned for that. So in summary, I believe that the foundations and the feds are working on important aspects of building evidence. Often it's side by side rather than collaboratively, but together we are accomplishing, I think, some important work in the field. And it's an investment that may have short-term impacts, but I think in the future it will really bear a lot of fruit. Thank you.